This is not a drill, and this is not a normal news alert. What I am reporting tonight, what you may have heard about because it broke today, is evidence of a potential crime committed by the president in plain sight. The top story tonight, and in many ways for the Russia probe, the only story, is public presidential conduct that would be unthinkable in any other era. President Trump doing in public what got Richard Nixon in so much trouble when he did it in private. Something that would make any citizen, without regard to party, very concerned tonight. Allegedly abusing the power of office to try to shut down a probe into his own White House. Words that apply to Nixon and undid his presidency, and words that are advanced tonight. So let's get into the story. You may know, if you watch this news program, we don't typically treat Donald Trump's tweets as news stories, because most of them are not news, many of them are not factual, some of them are outright lies, and a great many of them are ploys designed to hijack the conversation, distract the media, or troll the nation. So let me explain up front why we're doing something different tonight. President Trump is telling the Attorney General to shut down the Mueller probe. He's stating it in public and in writing that Jeff Sessions, quote, should stop the probe now. Now, to be clear, if Donald Trump made that order in a private meeting with Jeff Sessions or on a phone call to the DOJ or held a big press conference on the White House lawn and demanded it, if any president did that, it would be huge news. It would be potential evidence of obstruction. So here we do begin with this part of the story. Donald Trump, this is how he made the basic order, writing that Sessions, who is, of course, recused from the Russia investigation under the guidance from the DOJ, should, quote, stop it right now. The top House Democrat investigating Russia responding by says this is, quote, an attempt to obstruct justice in plain sight. And this comes just days after we learned that Bob Mueller was looking at whether these other things that Trump does and says, whether they occur on Twitter or wherever they occur, are part of the elements of the case of obstruction of justice, which, according to at least past Congresses, is something that, again, I don't usually refer to out loud on this show, but something that past Congresses have found to be an impeachable offense. So that is all the big news tonight. What is Donald Trump's team doing about it? Well, they're saying these words, which I just reported, which you can read, which are out in the open, aren't really what they say they are.
He used the word should. He didn't use the word must. And there was no presidential directive that followed it. He didn't direct him to do it. This whole obstruction of justice thing is nonsense. If he wanted to obstruct it, he'd obstructed it.
Comes after Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer on this probe, has argued that when Trump does something on Twitter with 54 million people watching it happen, it can't be bad.
First of all, obstruction by tweet is not something that I think works real well. Generally, obstruction is secret, it's clandestine, it's corrupt.
This is something we've reported on as well previously on this program. The defense that something done in public would be sneakier done in private is not a defense to the conduct. It's just sort of a weird after-the-fact rationalization. The idea that Trump shouldn't, according to Giuliani, have legal exposure for any mistakes or any crimes, potential crimes, that one commits in public. And this obviously would be helpful to Donald Trump because of many things that he has done that are in question about this investigation have occurred in public. He publicly admitted that he fired Comey with Russia on his mind. He publicly suggested he could fire Sessions for the same goals, and he publicly asked a foreign government, as we all now remember, as an issue in this open case, to hack his political rival.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Just because you do something that sounds bad, looks bad, or is potentially criminal out in the open, on camera, on Twitter, wherever, does not mean as a legal matter you can't be held accountable for it.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Donald Trump made that claim as sort of rhetorical gambit about a hypothetical murder, with the idea that even that would be something his supporters would stand by. That isn't usually a positive thing to say about other people, and we don't know whether his supporters would stand by it. What we do know in the matter of law is that kind of thing is not something that federal investigations will allow. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be joined by Richard Painter, an ethics lawyer from the Bush administration who has a lot of thoughts about this. But I begin with former federal prosecutor Cynthia Oxney and Christian Farias, a legal writer for New York Magazine. Cynthia, this does seem significant. Is it an element of potential obstruction?
I don't think it's an element of obstruction. I think it's something that goes in an obstruction indictment. I think it's a statement of the president, which is admissible. I think it shows consciousness. Not only this, but all the other tweets show different levels of consciousness of guilt, and they're important for the proof of intent. But it's not. I don't think it's a separate count, and I say that because I
think we're starting out real lawyerly. When I say an element, I mean, does it go to part of the obstruction evidence and the case of his intent and his goals? I didn't say count.
Oh, sure. I think it goes to intent and his goals. I think there's plenty of obstruction evidence, and there will be even more obstruction evidence, good old-fashioned bread and butter obstruction evidence. And then this will be part of the indictment and part of the evidence that is given to either a jury or in an impeachment trial. But standing alone, I don't think it's a count.
Right. I mean, I don't. Who cares whether it's a count?
Well, some people do. Some people do. But I don't.
Let me bring Christian in. I mean, the question is whether this adds to the case against the president for potential obstruction of justice. What would happen if Barack Obama or George W. Bush or any other president out of the blue stood up in public, in whatever medium, on whatever way, and said to their recused attorney general, shut down immediately the probe into my campaign?
People will be calling for his head. We know that because we've seen it when he mentioned some things about the Hillary Clinton investigation, and people's heads collectively exploded. But here, more importantly, as the prosecutor was saying, this is one piece of a larger puzzle that shows that there is certainly a consciousness of guilt. This goes to the question of whether what's bothering the president so much that on the very same day that one of his former campaign chairmen is going on trial, he has the presence of mind to say these things, to shut down the probe completely.
Well, as you say, on the very week that the campaign chair is on trial, it's the first trial that Mueller has reached.
Exactly, and the fact that this has happened in the context of this, and it's not even the main trial that Mueller will be handling. We know that there's a separate D.C. trial where the stakes are much higher, but that this is happening as all of these revelations are coming up during trial, as prosecutors are in court preparing their arguments. There's certainly something there that he is issuing this order to the Department of Justice, which has control, oversight over other prosecutors, that certainly strengthened the case for obstruction.
I want you both to stay with me. As promised, I'm bringing in Richard Painter, chief White House ethics lawyer in the Republican administration. He is now running as a Democrat for the U.S. Senate in Minnesota. I go to you, sir, on this central question. Does this statement account as evidence or an element of potential obstruction by Donald Trump?
Well, it's certainly evidence of obstruction of justice. And first, we really have to worry about the mental stability of our president when he is incriminating himself on Twitter. And this is a very, very damaging, very incriminating tweet. It's part of a long pattern of obstruction of justice. He fired James Comey. He has repeatedly tried to pressure Jeff Sessions to unrecuse and fire Robert Mueller. And the prosecutor will find evidence of obstruction inside the White House, I'm sure. But, you know, the House and Senate Judiciary Committee should be investigating this. We're way past the time we were in 1973 when they were investigating Richard Nixon. And I'm shocked that there is no investigation for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and other high crimes.
Let me ask you, Richard,
misdemeanors.
why do you think that tonight we're in a place that is past where we were with Nixon regarding presidential obstruction? What supports your view on that?
I think we were past that point when he fired James Comey. It was quite clear he fired James Comey in order to obstruct the Russia investigation, and he admitted to that in front of the Russian ambassador in several TV interviews. And we should have had hearings of the House and Senate Judiciary Committee at the same time that Robert Mueller was hired. And that's the way it was done in the Nixon days. They had the House and Senate actually doing their jobs and investigating. This is and has been evidence of obstruction of justice going all the way back to the Comey firing at least. It's shameful it's not being investigated. He ought to be out of office by now.
And I know that you speak as someone who's running for a Senate seat, so we're getting a window into what you would do if in that body. Cynthia, take a listen to how Donald Trump used to say he would deal with these type of matters.
I said on the Department of Justice I would stay uninvolved. Now, I may get involved at some point if it gets worse.
What does it say to you about the case against him if he is now getting more involved on the week of his campaign chairman's trial?
You know, I think there's a couple of reasons, and they're pretty interesting legally. One is Giuliani dropped this little gem in his unhinged interview that they had sent a proposal to Mueller's office in which the president would agree to testify, and they had a proposal, and it's been 11 days, and they've heard nothing. And I think that's freaking them out. Because what we know is, of course, that when a person moves from the subject of an investigation to the target of an investigation, we don't subpoena them anymore. And I think they're afraid that that's what's going on.
Let's slow down even on that very important point you're making, just so everyone's staying with you. You're saying that the fact that Bob Mueller's team is potentially no longer in active negotiations for an interview could suggest that their posture has changed from gathering information from the president as a subject, which is bad but middle bad, to not seeking his testimony because they view him as a target, which is bad, super bad.
Exactly. And I think that in addition, I think they're playing with his head and Giuliani's head, which isn't apparently that hard. But by just not responding, I think that has upped the pressure and the tension. And then not only the fact of the Manafort trial, but what happens in the course right before these trials is witness statements are turned over. Now Giuliani probably knows, because the Manafort lawyers have given it to him, he knows all kinds of information about what Gates is saying. And that has also made him unhinged. And then when he becomes unhinged, his client becomes unhinged. And the two of them behave in a very unprofessional and slightly ridiculous way.
Right, and you're putting your finger on that, which goes to all the rumors that Giuliani started about this pre-meeting that he claims didn't happen, but he wanted to talk about anyway, Christian, which here on The Beat with our legal experts, we've referred to as a dinner that didn't occur, but where sushi was served, which is that paradoxical. It's the legal version of an M.C. Escher staircase. And so to Cynthia's point, how much of this obvious freakout, in your view, from your reporting and your understanding, is a product of recent things that Trump and Giuliani have learned that make them scared?
One thing that Trump team has learned is that Bob Mueller, not just in Virginia, but also in D.C., has put a lot of pressure, a lot of trial tactics that should truly freak them out. Manafort just dropped an appeal before the D.C. Circuit that shows that truly his lawyers are weary, that his lawyers perhaps are getting tired by all this pressure that Mueller is putting on them. And ultimately, of course, Trump is verifiably freaked out that he might flip. He was there at that Trump. You
think that sign here is worrying about new flipping? Because we've been told many times, well, that's not in the cards.
Absolutely.
By so-called experts.
Right. Even yesterday, Manafort's lawyer said that, no, there's no way I'm cooperating with the special counsel. And if anything, all this just sticking to your guns of Manafort's team shows that, who knows, maybe he's waiting for that little olive branch for Trump, perhaps, to happen later. And you've never heard Manafort say anything bad about Trump at all, whereas all these other witnesses and people who have flipped or who have pleaded guilty obviously are not in the president's graces anymore, and it's very unlikely that he'll pardon them. But Manafort, he's still hanging on tight, and that tells me something that perhaps Trump doesn't want him to do something that might incriminate him even further.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.